Hello, BirthFit community. This is Lindsay Matthews Cantu, your BirthFit founder and CEO. And I am jumping on for a solo podcast to discuss a little bit about the core and pelvic floor. This is going to be titled Core and Pelvic Floor Research Part 1, because I'm sure we will have a Part 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to 10, maybe 100, who the hell knows. But I wanted to get this conversation started. Whenever I started BirthFit, there was so much misinformation out there, and it took me a while to dig in, which is why I want to have this episode. And ultimately, why it took me a while to make the BirthFit Coach seminar and to really get the foundations of BirthFit and our methodology ironed out. So before we dive in, I want to let you all know that this is not medical advice. This is for your information, your education only. Do with it what you want. It's knowledge is power, and that's what we hope to give you through these podcasts and any of our programs. So take it, do whatever you want with it, and evolve as a human. A reminder, our BirthFit prenatal training program is 20% off when you use the code BF podcast pre, and our BirthFit postpartum package is 20% off when you use the code BF podcast post. So write those codes down, use those 20% off, and I hope to see some of you in the programs. We have monthly support calls, we have a chat section. There's a ton of ways to get your questions answered and a community of support. So I absolutely know that BirthFit is it's been vital to so many women and their pregnancies, their conception journeys, their pregnancy journeys, and for sure their postpartum healing journeys. So I know it can help you. All right. And last thing before we dive in, we have some amazing guests coming up on the BirthFit podcast. Some that I know will truly rock you at your core and challenge you from the inside out. And, you know, I'm sure you will not agree with everything. In fact, I know, but that's the beauty of life. We are not supposed to agree on everything under the sun. When we do, that gets really freaking boring. So, anyways, when something comes up that challenges you, and stuff made today on this podcast talking about core and pelvic floor, I'd really, really encourage you to tune in to yourself. Like, forget about reacting and looking outside and pointing the finger and blaming or canceling or censoring or any of that shit. And I just encourage you to ask yourself, wait, what is my role in this? Because that is a very powerful question. And that, when I learned that I have a role in everything, yes, the other person's behavior may be shitty. It doesn't excuse their behavior. But when I learned that I have a role in everything and to take radical responsibility, whew, light bulbs, fireworks went off in my brain, in my heart, and in my body. So I'd encourage you to do the same. And if you need a book for a jump start on that, check out Loyalty to Your Soul. That is an awesome book. I would start there. There's other amazing books out there, but I've certainly loved that one. And I've loved the book Mindset by Carol Dweck. So, you. All right, y'all, let's dive in. Let's talk about core and pelvic floor in this episode, part 1. And I'm going to This right here is a warm cup of Harmony by Organifi, and I'm drinking it with raw cream. Surprise, surprise. But I love Organifi's Harmony during my luteal phase of my cycle. So if you need to support your luteal phase, check that out. Not sponsored, nothing. That's just what I do. Mm. All right, so here we go. Hmm. How are we going to start this? So, let me tell you about BirthFit's views on core and pelvic floor. And they're my views. This is what got us started. So, the core is the entire section from your neck down to your pubic bone, from the base of your skull down to your pubic bone, 360 degrees round. Think of it like a canister or a keg or a LaCroix can, if you will. And that is your core. Your core is not just your rectus abdominis. Your core is not just your rectus abdominis. It's not just your transverse abdominis either. Your core is everything, everything. And our goal at BirthFit is to have a strong and dynamic core, one that is flexible and one that is sturdy. If we're too flexible, we are not stable. We can't stabilize. If we are too rigid, then we cannot embrace movement. We cannot embrace fluidity. So dynamic stability is our goal. And you need two things in order to have dynamic stability. You need to have all of your muscles, all of the interspinal segmental stabilizers working together. So you need all the muscles. Like, I cannot stress this enough. Your rectus abdominis, your transverse abdominis, your internal oblique, your external oblique, your pelvic floor, your diaphragm. You need your lumbar spine erectors. You need all of those working together to play the game. You also need, so I said you need two things. Part two, you also need task-specific intra-abdominal pressure. Ooh, so that may be triggering to some people because some people are like, you don't need any internal pressure. Well, we have a beautiful internal pressure system that protects our organs, like our reproductive organs, and our disc, our spinal disc, which reside in between each vertebrae. And these discs get nutrients through movement. This process is called imbibition. So we need movement. Breath is a form of movement, that like a small form of movement. We need that. And at the basis of the foundation of our dynamic, stable core is our breath. Our diaphragm and our pelvic floor sit nicely stacked on top of each other, and they work in harmony with each other. Our pelvic floor never works in isolation. You simply do not contract your pelvic floor to walk across the room. You use all these other muscles. um, so, on a basic human breath, a diaphragm breath, as in what we call it, on the inhale, the diaphragm and the pelvic floor move down together. Everything expands 360 degrees on the inhale. So just think about this like the canister, it's expanding. On the exhale, everything naturally returns back to neutral. There's no sucking up and in of your pelvic floor. There's no pulling your belly button to your spine. That's just doesn't work. That's not how we as humans, we're designed to breathe. Just think about that. And now I want you to think about babies. I want you to think about new babies lying on the ground with their spines on the ground, their face up, And have you ever seen a new baby suck their belly button to their spine? Absolutely not. So they are learning to breathe and they are learning to stabilize as their beautiful innate intelligence is presenting to them, is showing them. We all are innately intelligently designed by a force, a God bigger than us. So I do not think that God would have have designed us to suck our pelvic floor up and in every single breath. So think about that as I put some chapstick on. All right, so that is a regular human breath. We label it a diaphragm breath, but call it whatever you want. A regular human breath works just fine. And ideally, that inhale and exhale happens through your nose. Ideally, because when we start to breathe and we continue to breathe through our nose, this signals to our nervous system that we are safe and it's okay to be here. When we start breathing through our mouth, then this puts an alert on our nervous system that there may be a threat nearby. And so then hormones, physiology start to shift and different processes occur. So we're going back to the breath here. Now, for stability, as we need to stabilize, like I said, we need two things. We need task-specific intra-abdominal pressure, and we need all the muscles playing the game together. So we don't need to single out any muscles unless we have been evaluated, and that is what we need to do in that moment of time for rehab. But most of the time, majority of the time, you've got to start with a general foundation such as this. So, and you've got to have this knowledge. You've got to have this basic knowledge of what a stability breath is. So, a stability breath is the label that we put on a task-specific intra-abdominal pressure breath, because this is where we are creating stability. So diaphragm, pelvic floor are lined up together. The inhale is just the same. Everything lowers together, diaphragm and pelvic floor lower together. Everything expands 360 degrees. Except on the exhale now, our pelvic floor meets the resistance of the internal pressure that was created. The muscles in and around the system, the canister, meet the resistance that was created. A lot of the muscle and the groups of muscle are eccentrically contracted here in their most elongated phase. Hello, pelvic floor eccentric contraction. That is what is happening here. So, what I want you to try, hands on the bottom of your rib cage. You're going to breathe in and breathe out, trying to maintain that expansion you created on that inhale. Think about somebody punching you in the belly. You're not going to suck your spine all the way to your belly button. You're going to brace. And ideally, you're going to brace 360 degrees all the way around. Think about bracing or keeping contact with your bra strap line all the way around on that exhale. That is the most fundamental piece of the stability breath, is maintaining that expansion. The pelvic floor meets that resistance. So keep that in mind. We have the regular human breath where diaphragm and pelvic floor inhale, lower together. On the exhale, they raise back up. They naturally return back to neutral. On the stability breath, the inhale is the same. The diaphragm and the pelvic floor lower together. However, on the exhale, the pelvic floor meets the resistance that was created by our own internal pressure system. I need you to accept that we have our internal pressure system. An internal pressure system is not a bad thing. If a PT or somebody told you that somewhere, they're living in the dark ages. All right, so, and let me share just a lot of my training has been done through the Prague School of Rehab and Dynamic Neuromuscular Stabilization, DNS. And also, I've done functional range conditioning. Um, I forget what else, but lots of stuff. So, at the base of what DNS teaches, we learn developmental kinesiology, which is how we as humans learn to move from basically infancy, from womb to being able to walk. So, I need you to understand that we have to go through these developmental milestones, not only for our physical development, but for our social and cognitive development as well. So, I'm going to hit some of these. When a baby comes out, they, no matter where they're at in this world, if they're in Texas, if they're in New York, if they're in Italy, if they're in Japan, if they're in Australia, wherever, Bali, they're going to go through these same developmental milestones in the same sequence, no matter where they are, if they are left with motivation and uninterrupted. If they're not put in these damn walkers or these bumbo seats, they will all go through the same sequential milestones. So, babies, let's say baby's laying on his or her back. And one of the first things, like I'm going to hit some big ones, but not all of them. Baby starts to move their thumb from inside to outside the fist. Mm. Next, baby will start to grab or like move their arms and move their legs. So they start to look like that dead bug situation. And you'll see a lot of these movements in the BIRTHFIT basics. And I'll get into that later. But dead buggish. So that's one of the things. Happy baby, this is a big position. These two are important because baby's learning to utilize their diaphragm and stabilize in the sagittal plane. Super important. After this, baby learns to look and then roll over. Like, look, okay, I can go that way now. I'm going to roll my whole body over. So they can roll side to side. And they're rolling like they are like a rotisserie chicken. Like the whole spinal unit is rolling in that neutral spine position. When they roll to their side, they're on their elbow, they're on their hip, they're on their bottom knee. They're learning to stabilize on that same side, that ipsy side, ipsilateral stabilization. That's a big step. In the BIRTHFIT basics, you will see variations of the side plank. This is due to this rolling and this ipsilateral side stabilization. Super important. Now, once they get to the side, they can press up to their hand and then go into like a shin box, shimmy to the other side. When they get up to their hand, they have a free hand and now they realize they can grab things. And basically, they start to become unstoppable at this point because they've changed into a different plane of motion. So now they're starting to stabilize in a different plane of motion and nothing is against their back. So they're having to do it in space, basically. Once they get up to that oblique sit, hello BIRTHFIT basics, then, like I said, they can go to shin box, hello BIRTHFIT basics, or they can continue on over into that tabletop position. Ooh. Tabletop is a huge milestone because we are having to stabilize in space. It's grand, it's magnificent. Once in tabletop, we can go to tripod and we can start crawling. Woo. So there's lots of options there. And then eventually, baby will crawl, baby will lift up knees into high bear. Baby will also go to like 3 points of contact where you grab something, like grab a couch, grab an ottoman, pull themselves up to stand, or then eventually bear, squat, bear, stand, kind of different variations in between there. There is a position, I'm sorry, I forgot this. Before baby gets going crawling, they do this sort of hip thrust thing and may look like they're humping the air, but this is really them just kind of activating their posterior chain and saying, hello, glutes, hello, hamstrings. It's kind of a dead end movement, but it's really, it's necessary. So keep that in mind. Um, Babies are born with diastasis rectus abdominis. And I need you to make note of that. Like we were all born with diastasis rectus abdominis. And this starts to approximate as we go through these developmental milestones and we build upon these developmental milestones. This is why these milestones are so important. This is why BIRTHFIT basics are so important. This is why I think it's really not necessary and just kind of ignorant to single out muscle groups like the transverse abdominis early in postpartum healing, especially when the client or the mother has not been evaluated by a legit physical therapist that does internal exams or some sort of movement specialist that truly knows about postpartum healing, like myself. You like that? Like I said, these are the foundations. And breath, stability breath, BIRTHFIT basics, these are foundations. And they're the building blocks of everything. And if you don't have these mastered or practiced or whatever you want to call it, then it's really hard to build from. It's really hard to heal from. And at some point, somewhere, compensation patterns will develop. And I guarantee nagging injuries will show up, hip injuries, low back injuries, things like that. So you got to do the foundations first. Then we can start to pick things apart. Then we can go, okay, this doesn't look like it's healing optimally. Let's focus on the TVA. This doesn't look like it's healing as good as I would like. Let's focus on these type of Kegels for the issue you have going on with your pelvic floor. This doesn't look like optimal healing like I want it to. Let's focus on bringing your rib cage down to really support these obliques in this position. So those are just some tangents, but yeah. Yeah, that's where I'm at there. So keep all those things in mind. And I want to bring your awareness to, and like I said, I want to start sharing some studies and because I got to read a lot of studies, so I want to share them with you. Which one is this? So here we go. This study, which is in the Journal of Musculoskeletal and Neuronal Interactions, 2019. It says efficacy of deep core stability exercise program in postpartum women with diastasis rectus abdominis, a randomized controlled trial. Okay, so the objective of this study was aimed at discovering the efficacy the deep core stability exercise program has on the closure of diastasis recti and the overall improvement in the quality of life for postpartum women. So here we go. What I want to point out is um, in one group, women underwent a deep core stability strengthening program plus traditional abdominal exercise programs 3 times a week. The other group only did traditional abdominal exercises. Both did this 3 times a week for 8 weeks. The results, the DRA separation, oh, where did sorry, I lose my conclusions. Here we are. The deep core stability exercise program is effective in treating diastasis recti and improving postpartum women's quality of life. So, not the group that only did traditional abdominal exercises, but rather the group that did a deep core stability strengthening program. That group was way more effective, A, in treating diastasis recti and in the improving of postpartum quality of life. The sample size is small, 20 and 20 in each group. But I do like this study because it's one of the only that I've seen that have actually tested deep core stability exercises. Here we go. Let me scroll down. I was trying to get so in this, like, abdominal bracing is huge in this, like, they talk about it in this study. Conclusion. Yep, conclusion. Deep core stability exercise program is effective in treating diastasis recti and improving postpartum women's quality of life. Oh, this is what I wanted to. Where did we go? I was trying to. If you're watching the YouTube video, I'm probably making funny faces. um, ah. So, just some background. DRA, as many of you know, is the midline separation, this splitting of the linea alba that runs down between the rectus abdominis. And determining a DRA is done using a criteria, a separation of more than 2 centimeters at one or more points of the linea alba, including the level of the umbilicus or 4.5 centimeters above and or a visible midline bulge with exertion. So you might hear us refer to this as coning. If you're inside of our programs, you know, many of you have sent us videos to see if you're coning, how you're coning. We teach at the BIRTHFIT coach seminar how to spot coning, this bulging. But yeah, rectus abdominis separation is more predominant above the umbilicus. And some studies, like I was just reading another study, which we'll get into later, but the predispositions, the basically um, like risk factors in for DRA are kind of all over the place and very controversial. Um, I have seen more DRA in obese and overweight. I have seen more, and this is just me in my office. I have seen more DRA with, depending on what kind of sports specific background people had, for example, gymnastics and or something that was very one side dominant. Um, because if you just think about it, like the body needs to be symmetrical, or we need to pay attention to both sides for um, DRA to approximate. Um, so anyways, it's more common above the belly button, and yeah, the inner here we go. Where did I see? DRA normally manifests in the second trimester, and almost all pregnant women have DRA. 66 to 100% experience DRA during the third trimester, um, while almost half of the women, up to 53%, go through it immediately after the child is born. Um, yes, hormones will affect the elasticity of the connective tissue. And, that's something not to be unaware of. If you have a severe anterior pelvic tilt, that may be a contributing factor. Like I said, all of these things kind of go into it. If you have a previous injury, what I've seen is, you know, a big trauma hip injury or a big trauma shoulder injury, like, that's gonna develop you're gonna develop compensation patterns at some point in your life, and it's gonna affect the fascial lines and your motor patterns. So just keep that in mind, and it's one of the things within BirthFit that we focus on is balance, balancing the front and back, side to side, like, that's so important. Um, so going back to this, there's studies also that, some say DRA is linked to pelvic floor dysfunction, while other studies say there's no correlation. Some say DRA, is linked to a higher degree of, back pain. Some say there's no correlation. Um, but those are the kind of studies I wanna get into. But, I wanted to okay, so I was trying to point out some of these exercises, because they look very similar to the BirthFit basics. Um, abdominal bracing, here we go. So a large towel or sheet secured around the abdominal so they could feel the bracing. If you go to our YouTube page, you can find breathing with a tactile feedback. Diaphragm breathing, pelvic floor contraction, plank, isometric abdominal contractions. Um, there's no sit-ups. No sit-ups, no freaking sit-ups, no bicycle sit-ups, no crunches, none of that in these deep core exercises. Why? Because those don't work. That's to put it lightly. Um, so I really wanted to share this study because I think, more and more studies need to be done around exercise and healing, and there's just not a first of all, there's not a lot of studies on women, period. But second of all, it's very hard to study women in and around pregnancy and postpartum because pregnancy and postpartum is hard to study. But I wanted to point out this study because isometric holds, diaphragm breathing, bracing, it talks about all those things, excuse me, which we talk about. And it validates what we've been saying for frickin' years that deep core stability is what you have to do first. And that starts with diaphragm breathing. That starts with stability breathing, aka bracing. That starts with basic movement patterns, such as the BIRTHFIT basics. And the BIRTHFIT basics are 15 movements and poses that they're free. They're on YouTube. You could go look them up. And these people did their deep core exercises 3 times a week, and they improved. They improved their symptoms of DRA in 8 weeks. So I'd encourage you to try it. I mean, there's nothing why not? You got nothing to lose. Um, and that's about how often I check clients. If somebody comes to me and they want to improve their DRA symptoms, I check them first, and then I do not check them again for 6 to 8 weeks. There's no reason to aggravate the symptoms. There's just not. You've got to trust the process. You've got to trust the healing that your body is doing. So, BIRTHFIT basics are free. They're on YouTube. If you want to follow a program, we have the BIRTHFIT Basics prenatal program, which will, we strongly believe that it will aid in prevention and or severity of DRA. And also in the BIRTHFIT Basics prenatal program, we increase walking volume, which is really important for labor and delivery and birth, the whole birth experience. And then we also have the BIRTHFIT Basics Postpartum program, which is included in our postpartum package. But both of these are only focused on the BIRTHFIT Basics movements, and the training days, and I say that kind of with quotations, are done around the BIRTHFIT basic movements with different volumes, different sets, different setups, things like that. So check it out. Share this podcast with anybody that needs to learn about core and pelvic floor. And let us know if you have any questions. I'll be doing more of these solo podcasts in the future because I definitely want to get into more of core and pelvic floor research with you all. All right. Stay tuned to the BIRTHFIT podcast. Subscribe. Leave us a review. And I look forward to doing some lives with y'all soon. All right, y'all. Talk soon. Bye.